one more minute. All right, good morning, everyone. It's 9:30, so we'll get started on our class. We're in 1 Timothy. 1 Timothy, we're into the second chapter. Last week, we were finishing up with verse 8, where Paul is telling Timothy, I desire therefore that men pray everywhere, lifting up holy hands without wrath or doubting. And we talked about the men's responsibility to lead in the prayer, in the worship. Now he starts off in verse 9 in the New American Standard. He says, likewise. In the King James, it says, in like manner also. And now he's talking about women. So we're going to read verses 9 through 15, and then we're going to kind of break this up. And we'll talk about verses 9 and 10, and then we'll talk about verses 11, 12, 13, 14, 11, 12, 13, 14, and then we'll talk about verse 15. But first, let's read through these verses. 1 Timothy, 2nd chapter, verses 9 through 15. In like manner also, that the women adorn themselves in modest apparel with propriety and moderation, not with braided hair or gold or pearls or costly clothing, but which is proper for women, professing godliness with good works. Let a woman learn in silence with all submission, and I do not permit a woman to teach or have authority over a man, but to be in silence. For Adam was first formed, then Eve. And Adam was not deceived, but the woman being deceived fell into transgression. Nevertheless, she will be saved in childbearing if they continue in faith, love, and holiness with self-control. All right, let's break this down. And you can remember from 1 Peter. 2 Peter chapter 3, verse 16, that some things of Paul's are hard to be understood. And there's an item or two in here. Some of this is easy to be understood. Some of this can be hard to be understood. Okay, verse 9, he talks about women adorning themselves in modest apparel with propriety and moderation, not with, and then this is the things he highlights that are apparently opposed to propriety and moderation, braided hair or gold or pearls or costly clothing. So I think it's interesting the kind of things that they picked out, that Paul picked out, that are opposed to what he would call propriety and moderation. Now, I think it goes without saying that a lot of times when we think about women dressed in immodestly, we think about things that are, too low, too short, too tight, something of that nature. That's the first thing that usually comes to my head when I think about something that's not right. Because some of the other things, I guess it's because I'm a man, I don't notice some things. Mary Lee and I will be out to dinner, and there'll be somebody sitting there next to us, and we'll get back in the car, and she'll say, did you see her rings? I said, rings? She had rings? I didn't notice any rings. She had a diamond that was like, I don't know, 20 carat or something like, it is a huge diamond. Well, she notices those kind of things. I didn't pick up on that. I was like, oh, well, I didn't know she had a ring. I just thought her eyebrows looked weird. Something like that I might notice, but I didn't notice that kind of thing. Well, I don't remember anything different, about. I mean, I remember weird eyebrows. I noticed weird eyebrows sometimes, but uh, but some things are noticeable by some people that are not noticeable as quickly by other people. But we generally think of something being, when we talk about immodest dress, we think of the, too low, too short, too tight kind of things, which is, I think it goes without saying, is immodest. But Paul is talking about things here where women are trying to draw attention to themselves by the way they're dressing. Undue attention. Now, a similar verse here is over in 1 Peter 3, verse 3 and 4. I'm gonna jump over there and read that one at the same time. 1 Peter 3 and 4. Okay. Now, Peter says somewhat similar language to what Paul's talking about. Do not let your adornment be merely outward, arranging the hair, wearing gold, or putting on fine apparel, but rather let it be the hidden person of the heart with the incorruptible beauty of a gentle and quiet spirit, which is very precious in the sight of God. And there Peter's saying, kind of using just some different set of words, almost the same kind of thing that Paul was saying. And them writing not too far. But again, he's talking about how much they're trying to draw attention to themselves in an undue way. And I think Mary Lee and I talked about this morning. I was telling her what I've got to kind of go through and teach this morning. And she brought out a very important word that I thought, this I think hits the nail on the head. Intentional. Women, I think, can be intentional, or men can do it too, but women can be intentional to try to wear something outlandish or trying to bring attention to themselves in a way to lift themselves up, to draw attention from other folks, or they can, but they can also use that intentional to intentionally dress correctly. And that's a key factor, is making the effort to do it right. You're probably going to do it right if you come out and just make the effort to do that. He's not saying women should not look nice. That can't be what he's saying, because we know later in Scripture Paul compares the church to a bride adorned for her husband. That sounds like he's talking like that's a really good thing. Something to be looked to. This is the way we want the church. We want the church to be like a bride adorned for her husband. Well, how does a bride get adorned for her husband? Well, she probably wears the nicest dress she can find, fixes her hair better than any other day she's ever fixed it, probably wears some jewelry or something that that fits everything else. It's looked at as a positive thing in that light. So we can't say that he's saying women should look like old hags all the time. That's not what he's saying. And thing is, y'all may have run across some, and some take this very seriously, and I can respect people for taking this very seriously, but in their denomination, the women really do kind of dress down quite a bit. But their personalities sometimes can overwhelm that dressing. They can still be loud and obnoxious even when they're dressed down, which he's trying to tell them how to act as well in these verses. The emphasis is supposed to be on the good works, not on drawing attention to themselves. Let's see what else I was going to say. Yes, sir. Yeah. Worldly. Okay. You mentioned that. That's another thing Mary Lee was saying this morning. She's saying, if we're not having some place where we're different than the world, then what are scriptures talking about when we're not supposed to be worldly? There is something that we're going to be different about. And our intention is going to be not to be worldly. Well, we can see what is worldly. You know, it's thrown in front of you on television all the time. It's thrown in front of you when you go out in public all the time. Things that are inappropriate. Now, yes. I know it. Yeah, gaudy looking. Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's right. They do it too. Yes. Right, right. Young people will be very much influenced by what they see in the half generation above them. Not so much the generation above them, but that half generation. You know, teenagers look at 20-year-olds and thinks, oh, that's the thing. You know, when they see somebody that's 20 or so, and it, you know, sometimes it's a shame to say it or to bring it up, but there are times, even in the worship assembly, I think we've all seen some inappropriate dress before. And it's embarrassing. And sometimes you do have to consider they may not have a background of teaching that we have. Hopefully they're going to get that quickly by being amongst us. But sometimes they may be from an environment that's different, and they may be doing what they think they always do. You know, they just get used to it in that way. But I'll tell of an incident, and I'm not going to mention any names or anything to get myself in any hot water. But years ago, I served as an elder over at Bobby Branch. We had a situation with a young lady that was, I guess she's about 18. She's part of a good family, but she was not dressing appropriate at worship. Without going into details, it was kind of getting to be a continual thing. And it's one of those kind of things when, you know, you kind of think in your head, somebody ought to say something to her. Somebody ought to say something to their parents. And I didn't say anything. You know, I just kept thinking, well, somebody else will. But finally, it actually got brought up in an elders meeting, that somebody had brought it to the attention of elders that we need to do a little bit of leadership here, because other means have been tried by members and weren't having any effect. So they all look around and they pick on me. Now, they pick on me because I was pretty good friends with the dad. So I got appointed, and I was thinking, this is an awkward situation for me. But I did the best I could. So I went to him and I said, friend, something needs to be addressed about what she's been wearing to church. First thing out of his mouth was, I know it. I agree with you. And we're going to take care of that. He said, we've been having that discussion at home, and I'm outnumbered. So the situation was taken care of. he's still a friend. Everybody in that family is still faithfully involved in church. So it was taken care of. Thank goodness. And sometimes you do have to say something. I don't know where the encouragement was coming from for this other look, but it's not a problem anymore, and they're all good folks. Yes, that's true. I know what you mean. I know what you mean. Yeah, 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 yeah. Well, I can remember. I'll say from a man side point of view, especially being a teenager or something. If a girl dressed modestly, as opposed to one that didn't, the modest girl was easier to talk to. It was easier to go up to her and talk because you weren't quite so distracted, and it was just a more comfortable thing to be friends with them sometimes than the other ones. But yes, ma'am.
I just wanted to comment, we cannot all of a sudden expect our girls and our boys to be affected by modesty at age 16. It has to start at a very, very young age. And we have to talk that and walk that so that they're seeing it and they're
Yeah.
learning it.
Right.
I disagreed with my husband when Jenny Lee was 3 years old. I bought her a little two-piece swimsuit because I thought it was so cute, her little tummy stuck out. He said, well, in the future, let's not buy those. I said, what? He said, two-piece swimsuits. He said, it's not going to be cute when she's 13 and 14. And when are we going to make that discernment that you do not show that much of your body? And I thought, the submissive side of me came in because I was like, well, this is cute, but I didn't do it anymore. And later I realized it's very slowly getting into their minds.
Yeah. Yeah.
My Nick was invited to a homecoming with Lipscomb, a Christian school, and he invited this girl, and I went to take pictures. And he came over to me. He didn't know her very well. It was a friend of his, a friend of a friend. And so the first thing he said was, Mom, she is not modest. And I was like, I thought, okay, how am I going to handle this? And so I told him, I said, you know what? You don't have to ask her to do anything anymore. Don't be rude. But he did tell her as the night went on that he thought what she had on was too short and immodest. And her mother called me the next week stating that she had never had a young man say that before, and she just appreciated the way he talked to her. But I
Yes. That's right. I think it's something that I think it's got to be brought up to the young people. And, you know, of course, parents have the ultimate responsibility. What can the church do? We can have in the girls' classes, this can be addressed. And it has to be addressed young, because you get more kickback if you address it when they're 17, 18, 19. Because they're pretty much, you know, they know everything by the time they're that age. When they're 12 and 13, you can still mold them in the right direction a little easier. And it's kind of be continually addressed. And the thing is, you might say, well, we've told the girls that. Well, we may have told them that 2 or 3 years ago, but now those 12-year-olds are 15 and those 9-year-olds are 12. And so you got to bring it up again in a class with the girls. And it can be a hard thing. You know, kids want to fit in. That is so important for them to fit in. I don't want to be the only one that looks this way. Well, yeah, we're going to look different as Christians. You know, that's going to be there. We're not going to fit in with the world lots of times. And so you got to emphasize, you look really nice, even though this is not too short. You look really nice, even though, you know, it's not overly too tight. And let them know that. You know, it's a lot of their self-esteem, I think, we were talking about self-esteem this morning too, is drawn off of what attention they get from other people. That kind of drives that self-esteem up a little bit, I think, sometimes. But we've got to help their self-esteem in the right way.
Steve, when my boys were playing football in Warren County in around 2002, 2003, there was and I hope this is not somebody that knows something. I thought I had heard everything there was to hear till I found out that there was one of the cheerleaders had gotten pregnant, and they had asked her to get off the team, and her mother and her filed suit against Warren County Schools. I can't think of anything less inspiring for me to cheer about than looking out there and seeing a cheerleader that's 6 or 7 months pregnant. The parents have lost their way. I'm old school, and I'll admit to it. I'm a parent. It's going to be my way. It's not going to be your way. We're not going to negotiate. We're not going to take a vote, because it's not democracy, you know. So the parents that allow their daughters to do that, just they don't have their head on straight. If I'm a person that's of a sexually inclined crime nature person, what better way to get me inspired to commit that crime than somebody with a dress that's about 6 inches below their hips? I don't understand what people are thinking.
Yeah. I understand. All right, let's see. We'll move on unless somebody else is going to raise their hand or tell me something else that we need to know on the topic. All right, let's look at verses 11, 12, 13, 14. Let a woman learn in silence with all submission. I do not permit a woman to teach or have authority over man, but to be in silence. He says that, and then he gives 2 reasons for his position right here. For Adam was first formed, then Eve. Second reason, Adam was not deceived, but the woman being deceived fell into transgression. All right, now some people may look at that and say, well, those aren't good reasons. Well, they're reasons that Paul gave. And I think he's given those reasons of saying this is the proper order of things. These are the proper roles. it's he does not want women to be in the position of authority over the men. She was made, if you look back in second chapter of Genesis, to be a helpmeet for Adam. That was her role that God has created. He did not ever say, well, they're not as valuable or as important or as critical, but he is saying this is a different role and a different level of responsibility that they're given. Now, women can teach other women situations in that they're not having authority over the man. Children, those are not men, those are little boys, and women can have authority over the children in those situations. I know sometimes, when young men become Christians and they're coming up in the classes, and we generally try to get men to teach the classes by the time they're at those age of accountability and they're becoming Christians. But even so, a 12, 13-year-old is not a grown man. He's still a little boy. And he is still subject to doing what his mama said to do. And he better do it. We want to bring those young men to a point of where they accept the responsibility and their role for being a leader in the home and a leader in the church. But we also want to be careful that we're teaching the young girls to be in a proper role, to learn that as well. Let's see if there was something. It's not a question of inferiority, but women are better suited for different roles. Now, we'll look at verse 15, and this one's a little harder to grasp sometimes what the point is right here. After he says that about not permitted a woman to teach or have authority over the men, be in silence. Adam's first formed, then Eve. Adam's not saved the woman. Then in verse 15, nevertheless, she will be saved in childbearing if they continue in faith, love, and holiness with self-control. Now, in the New American Standard, it says, but the women will be preserved through childbirth if they continue in faith, love, and sanctity with moderation. Now, we can talk about what this is saying, but one thing we can say what it's not saying. It's not saying this is another plan of salvation. Some people look at that, and you see this in some denominations where they say they got to have babies. They got to be having babies so they can be saved, and they kind of home in on that one thing and continue. Well, how long is she going to have babies? I mean, what if she's 70, 80 years old? She's not having babies anymore. Does that mean she's not going to be saved? I mean, is that what they're trying to say? So it's not talking about a alternative way for eternal salvation. So he's talking about something a little different. And we've kind of got to think about, what is it? What is it that she is saved or preserved through? And it so happened, I went over to see my daddy this morning, and my brother and sister always take him the newspaper. And I looked down on the floor, because I take these newspapers, I take them with me up to the cabin on the mountain. I use them to help start my fires. But here on the front of the page is talking about the concert they were having Friday night in Mount Minville over on well, they usually do it over Security Federal. I think they moved it into the old theater building. But they have a band that was going to play. The name of the band is Saved by the Music. Saved by the Music. Now, does anybody think they're talking about salvation? The people are saved from their sins because of the music that they're playing. It was the ultimate 90s experience. I thought 90s music wasn't old yet. I thought, I think oldies, I'm thinking 70s or before, but 90s experience, I don't even know what those are. But that's the name of their band, Saved by the Music. Well, what's their intention in using the word saved? I think I didn't ask anybody, but what's their intention in using the word saved? I think it's more like, they have a really good feeling from enjoying their music. It brings satisfaction to them to write songs, to play songs, to enjoy music together, to have fun with that. And it kind of lifts them maybe out of the doldrums into where they're enjoying themselves a little bit more. So they're kind of saved from where they were to a different set right there by enjoying the music. And that's how they're using the word saved. Well, here Paul is talking about women will be saved in childbearing. He's not talking about eternal salvation. That would be kind of obvious. But what is he talking about? I think it's one of these places where the word is, we talked about this before in Paul's writings, a synecdoche, which is where you use one word or phrase to kind of stand for the whole. We've talked about that. Paul sometimes used the word that we're saved by faith, but it's not just faith. We're also saved by repentance, obedience through baptism, those things. But he'll use the word faith, kind of a synecdoche, to stand for the whole of the plan of salvation. Sometimes he'll use the word mystery, about the mystery that we have. And the word mystery is kind of a word to stand for the whole of the gospel plan of salvation, and as it's being revealed in the New Testament. I think this is some of the more I think words coming out, which means they're not authoritative. It's more me. This is what I understand this to mean. This saved in childbearing is more of a synecdoche for the woman doing her normal traditional role, is what the point is. That there is satisfaction in that role. I see so many women, and you see this controversy all the time between, you see women that really enjoy raising their children. They get so much satisfaction out of that, out of teaching them, seeing them excel in things, helping them launch on their own and do things. And they get a lot of satisfaction out of seeing their children grow up and be good people. That's not salvation, but it's a lot of satisfaction in life in doing that. I think women get more satisfaction out of that than men do, seeing the children do well and grow up and develop in that way. So that's if that explains it. I think I've explained what I'm thinking. I think it's more of a synecdoche, for this is kind of how a word saying they'll be saved through childbearing, to kind of stand for the whole of the woman's traditional role. Now, sometimes there are situations where women can't fall into that traditional role. Some women cannot have children, and they want to. We've got a relative that's had several miscarriages trying to have children, and she wants them really bad, but she's just struggling with that. And it's hard to see somebody go through that. Sometimes that's just the way things fall out. Sometimes women get into marriage doing everything that they should and doing things the right way, but their husband turns out to be a scandal, and the marriage doesn't work out. And so sometimes that woman is left by herself and not able to be in that traditional role. So this isn't talking about everybody in every situation. It's just talking about in general, women would have children and be involved in overseeing the family and raising and involved with the children, raising in that role. And I think that's what he's trying to make that point. You may not be in a position of authority over the men, because that's not the role for the women. But you do have this traditional role that can be very satisfying and fulfilling. Now, that's just me. What's everybody else think this is trying to say? No other thought? It's a difficult verse to grasp and understand. And you can certainly take it out of context really quick if you're not careful. Yeah. 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 Right. So it's like couldn't make any that wouldn't make any sense that they could not have salvation because they couldn't have children. So that wouldn't make sense. So. Yes, sir. Yeah. Yeah, yeah. Well, yeah. I think my kids would all say I was not as apt at counseling and things, you know. They get hurt and they run across me first, and I say, well, rub some dirt on it, you know, it'll be all right. And their mama would, you know, she'd wash it off and kiss them and get a Band-Aid on it, you know, and give them an ice cream or something. And I'm like, okay, you know, they'll be all right because they're not dead. They're gonna heal, but yeah. Yeah. All right. Let's get into chapter 3. Chapter 3, 1 Timothy chapter 3, verse 1. He's going to talk about overseers, elders, bishops. This is a faithful saying. If a man desires the position of a bishop, he desires a good work. And the word bishop is translated over in the New American Standard as overseer. And this is the elder, a word here that's used interchangeably with the elders. Now, he's saying this is a faithful saying or a trustworthy statement in some translations. So what is the saying? If you desire the position of a bishop, he's desiring a good work. I think that the rest of that sentence in that verse, I think, is the saying that he's referring to. Now it talks about a position for being desired. That it, you know, you think about a person. Well, I'd like to be an elder someday. Well, that's a good thing, and it needs to be encouraged. We don't need to discourage people from having that desire to serve in that capacity, because it's a difficult work. You know, I think that's one thing that I learned from my experience of serving an elder, and I think every one of the fellows who is serving an elder would tell you the same thing. After you've done this for 6 months or a year, you're going, wow, this is harder than I ever thought it would be. When I was on the outside, I thought I knew what to tell the elders to do all the time. And I was just, well, they ought to do it this way. They ought to do it this way. And then I get on the inside and I'm like, oh, this is tough. And I can remember saying, I am so glad there are multiple elders, because even though there's multiple ones of us and you try to get wisdom from everybody in the meetings and you're discussing things, it's still hard sometimes to get that wisdom to rise to the top and do the best thing overall. And you learn respect for the fellow elders when, you know, in their wisdom, and your patience with your fellow elders, because every one of you as elders at times, you kind of blurt out something that probably you wish you hadn't blurted out in the elders meetings, but you kind of think, well, I said it, but they kind of brought me back in line and corrected me, and now we're going to go to a wiser path than what would have been my first gut reaction blurt that I said. But it's a good work, and we're talking about these qualifications. We won't get too far because the bell's going to ring. But then, well, there you go, right there, bell rang. So we'll hash through the elders here next week and do verse 2 through 7, and then in verse 8 we'll start in on the deacons.